So the league practically secured, favourites in the Champions League final. Manchester Derby coming up in the FA Cup final. Man City are odds-on favourites to win the treble. Let's talk about this final then against Inter in the Champions League. Let me start with you, Gab. Oh, sorry. In fact, let's not even do that. Let's talk about the game first and the absolute domination that we did see from Manchester City, because it's going to be great to get the thoughts of all of you guys on this one. Let me start with you then, Robbo.
Yeah, I thought, and Stevie talked about tactics are not always important, but I thought not only did Manchester City play at an intensity that Real Madrid didn't like, they also won the battle tactically, because they got John Stones to play in midfield with Rodri. They went 3 versus 3 at the back. So Rodrigo was up against Akanji, they had Benzema up against Diaz, and on the right-hand side, it was Vinicius Jr. against Walker. And Pep Guardiola said, OK, we'll leave 3 at the back. I'll push John Stones into midfield. And that's where we're going to create the overload. And unfortunately for Real Madrid, Toni Kroos went so deep, he sat in front of the 2 centre-halves and tried to stop Haaland playing. So they had 3 players against 1. And it meant that Rodri and John Stones could dictate the pace of the game, because Valverde was going against Gundogan, and Modric was going against Kevin De Bruyne. So not only did they get the tactics wrong, when they were in those positions, deep positions, they didn't defend it very well. When you saw the first goal, Bernardo Silva ran off the back of Camavinga, he ran off the back of Kroos. Modric didn't understand what was going on.
They fell further and further, deeper in the box, and then nobody stepped up eventually to try and stop a pass or a shot or whatever it may be. And, you know, sometimes when you play a defensive game like that, you sometimes get the impression that because you've got numbers there, you're safe. But when you fall into that trap, it doesn't work. And you just saw one team at their best and another team doing something that I don't think they're particularly great at. And maybe they should have started the game higher up the field.
Ancelotti's had his criticism, obviously, for not starting the likes of Rudiger after the first leg, what we saw from him on Haaland. What did Ancelotti get wrong, and would it have made a difference anyway?
I just think they started too deep. You know, you could argue with me that Man City pushed them back, but at the same time, it didn't take an awful lot. City were just walking with the ball till they got about 25 yards, and then maybe sometimes there was somebody coming to make an attempt to challenge. I mean, you're asking for trouble. I think they got their starting positions wrong, no question, because the deeper you are, even when you win the ball on the odd occasion, whether it's good play or whether somebody just miscontrols it, you can't get out. You're too deep. You're under too much pressure. You can't afford to start trying to pass the ball in your own penalty box when there's so many bodies. So I think 100% the biggest problem they had was their starting position was far too deep.
Do you agree, Robbo?
Absolutely. I said it there before. Toni Kroos wasn't doing anything. He wasn't challenging anybody. And then when it did come around the penalty box and the top third of the field, he then didn't make the right decisions. Modric was, and I mean this in the kindest way, he was frightened of the game. He didn't want to go and press too high up the field because he knew he was going to be played around. So he dropped even deeper, which allowed John Stones and Rodri. And if you allow Man City to have freedom of the middle of the park, and they can pick out their passes, it was going to be easy for Man City eventually to open them up. When you're playing against Man City, you have to have a game plan which makes them predictable. And I thought the game plan should have been that Rodrigo would come in field and mark Rodri and say, let Akanji have the ball. And then he passes it to Grealish, and we'll lock them down one side of the field. And it's much easier to defend when you lock a team down one side of the field. But they didn't do that. They allowed Man City so many easy passes, and it was only a matter of time before Man City scored.
Gab, we've asked you to put together a combined 11 of the 2 teams that are in the Champions League final. And our question is, did any Inter players make it into this 11? And the answer is yes. Talk us through it.
I had 3 Inter players in there, and I'm sorry, but I do feel the need to fly the flag a little bit. I went with Onana ahead of Ederson. Obviously not much in it, both outstanding goalkeepers, but Onana's kept so many clean sheets in this competition. And I think Ederson's had the odd wobble. I know he hasn't conceded many goals. At the back, 3 of the 4 are obviously Man City, the ones you'd expect. Ruben Diaz, Stones. You can put him in midfield if you like. He steps up occasionally. Walker, I'm not sure he's going to start, but I think what we saw in the 2 legs, he deserves to be there. And I had Bastoni because, you know what? If you're going to have a centre-back masquerading as a left-back, I like Bastoni better than Akanji there. From there, the midfield, as you would expect, it's all City, Rodri, and De Bruyne, and Grealish, and Bernardo Silva. No argument with Haaland up front. I do have the luxury, by playing 4-4-2, of having another forward. And so I'm going to pick Lautaro for it. But that's simply because I take Lautaro ahead of Julian Alvarez, because this isn't Qatar. This is going to be Istanbul. And Lautaro's been on fire.
Okay, Robbo, you're smiling there.
No, I agree. Bastoni is an excellent player, and he can play as a left-sided centre-half. And if John Stones steps into midfield, Bastoni would come across and be an excellent left-sided player. And I agree with Gab, better than Akanji. Martinez has been in excellent form. If it was Inzaghi picking the team and playing two up front, Martinez would get in it alongside Haaland. So absolutely right, Gab. I'm not sure about the goalkeeper, but who worries about goalkeepers?
Are you okay with it, Stevie? Your forward line?
I have no problem with Nana and Bastoni, absolutely, Gab, I'm with you 100%. However, this question should be how many of Inter players gets in the Man City team? And you can't, even 4-4-2, you cannot have Lautaro Martinez ahead of Julian Alvarez. And you can't just say Qatar. Julian Alvarez scored the goal in the World Cup final.
Yeah, he's saying this
final,
isn't Qatar, this is Istanbul.
Hold on. Arguably a bigger game than the Champions League final, the World Cup final. And he scored a goal in it. So I don't see that Martinez gets in any team, 4-4-2 or 4-3-3.
Gab?
All I can say is, I think when you play for Manchester City, there's an evident multiplier effect, right? Akanji's been phenomenal this year. Last year, he was another defender on a bad Borussia Dortmund team that couldn't defend well. Let me flip it around. If Lautaro had been at Man City the last 18 months instead of Julian Alvarez, might he be a better player than Julian Alvarez? I don't know. For me, this is a guy who scored 25 goals the last 2 seasons. This is a guy who's come up really, really big so many times for Inter. And Alvarez is a guy who sits on the bench, admittedly for Manchester City. So if I go 4-4-2, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick a starter to be a starter.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.